everyone. Good evening. You're watching The Money Show on ET Now. This is your daily 1 hour long dose of everything to do with personal finances. Today, here are the topics that we will be discussing. First up, the creation of a will or estate planning. Whatever your level of income, whatever the assets you have, in these times of uncertainty, the creation of a will has assumed even more importance. So we'll be getting into the nitty-gritties of that along with answering your personal finance related questions and queries. Second up, insurance. We will be talking about the IRDAI mandated standard health insurance, which of course is coronavirus specific. And we'll be talking about the two categories, Corona Kavach as well as Corona Rakshak, and whether you should include OPD in your insurance covers. And finally, the big rally in gold, and it coincides with the latest tranche of the sovereign gold bond scheme. So we'll be talking about whether that is a good way to really participate in the rally seen in gold prices. Well, before we do any of that, let's just take a look at the big headlines when it comes to the coronavirus pandemic and the latest numbers. First up, in India, the number of COVID cases have now crossed the 7 lakh or 700,000 mark. The city of Mumbai alone has overtaken China in terms of the number of coronavirus cases. BMC will be allowing COVID tests now without necessary prescription. Masks and hand sanitizers are now no more essential items. The UGC will be going ahead with its final year exams. On the Lal Street, meantime, shunning the increase in number of cases, the Nifty continues to rise, ends just shy of the 10,800 mark. No US visas will be given to students if their classes are moved completely online. More global news. Beijing has reported no new coronavirus cases. Dr. Fauci warns that vaccines could offer only finite protection against coronavirus. And finally, the global COVID-19 tally has crossed 11.6 million. Just touch upon the very first topic that we have decided to talk about, and that's with respect to estate planning or will. How many of you have this all important document already in place, or how many of your fathers have prepared this document? This is something that essentially ensures orderly, convenient and seamless distribution of all the hard work that has been put in by your fathers, by you as well, and converted into a variety of assets. This in turn needs to be properly distributed to your heirs or among your loved ones, and hence enter the process of estate planning. In these times of coronavirus and so much uncertainty around health, it all the more assumes a lot more importance. So we'll be talking about the nitty-gritties of creating a will, how complex or non-complex the process is. I have with me Raghvendra Nath, the MD of Ladderup Wealth Management. Mr. Nath, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today on The Money Show. I hope you and your family is doing well amidst these turbulent times. Mr. Nath, let's start off first by talking about why preparing a will all the more assumes so much importance in today's times.
Yeah, Mobina, as you just said, we are living in highly uncertain times, and this coronavirus has captured the imagination of the entire world. And, earlier, and what it has made sure is that all of us are with our families. We can say we are stuck at home, but, the perspective is that we are safe and sound with our families, And at this time when we are with our families and we can't even have an excuse that we are not traveling or we are busy or we have board meetings or we have quarter endings, I think thinking about a will is something which is extremely noble initiative, and because it will help each person protect their loved ones. Will in any case, one should do, and but it becomes more pertinent now because of the uncertainty around the disease, and which has basically resulted in so many people passing away, unfortunately. and without any kind of time in between. I think when the time is at hand, when we are keeping good health, creating a will so that your assets are seamlessly transitioned to your loved ones is something which is essential.
Well, it may sound like quite a morbid thought, but then one has to be pragmatic. One has to ensure that, after or on your, in the event, in the untimely event of your demise, your loved ones are taken care of, and all the hard work that you've put in during your lifetime is properly utilized, distributed among your loved ones. Okay, Mr. Nath, now let's start off by what should be included in the will. You may be having all kinds of assets, something like a house, maybe some jewelry, shares, mutual funds. There'll be so many assets that you may have created over your lifetime. So what's to be included in the will? What's not necessarily to be included in the will?
So, so first of all, when you're creating a will, obviously you are talking about the assets that you're leaving behind and how they need to be distributed. So anything that you own, so which you can say that, okay, I am the rightful owner of these assets. Only those assets need to be added into your will. So let's say you may be having, let's say, some assets jointly with your wife, then only that portion of asset which belongs to you, you need to include in your will, because your wife will have her portion of the assets that she owns, and these assets could be movable, immovable properties. They could be intangible assets. They could be tangible assets like paintings and jewelry, any other precious items that you may have, which you want to pass to your heirs or anybody that you wish beyond your heirs. You need to include all these assets in your wills.
Okay, anything that you wish to pass on to your loved ones, your heirs, your spouse, so on and so forth, needs to be mentioned in the will. How easy is it, Mr. Nath, to create a will? I mean, the first thought when what comes to one's mind when you think of will and estate planning is, these long corridors and these long meetings with one's lawyer, complex legal papers, stamp papers, so on and so forth. So is it a long process? What's the process like to create a will? Or is it something that while I'm sitting from home and thought comes to me that I should create a will, or while watching this show, the thought came to me that yes, even I should create a will, I can simply do so on my own and I don't really need any legal help or legal advice?
No, creating will is a extremely simple process, contrary to what many people believe. And many people, they don't end up making a will because they think either they are too young or they have too little assets, or, they are in good condition, good health. Why bother now? Let us basically look at it when we turn old or when we turn 60, 70. Anybody can make a will, and because a will can be changed any number of times, you don't have to basically get into that mindset that if I've created a will, then I will not be able to change it, so maybe I'll postpone this idea to a time when I have better thoughts and better idea about how I want to distribute my wealth. Making a will actually is a very simple process. All it may take is one Sunday afternoon. That's the kind of effort that you need to put. Okay. And of course, you can write your will yourself. There are enough drafts available. If you can go to Google and search for a draft for a will, you will get 100 answers, but this is a very, very important document. Just imagine, a house in Mumbai cost a few crores, and this is not only about the assets that you currently own. You also will continue to grow richer, continue to grow wealthier, continue to add more and more assets as you live, in the coming decades. And therefore, you're talking about some large amount of assets that you're going to leave behind for your family. So it's always worthwhile to maybe go and take legal advice from a lawyer who is expert in creating these wills, because even a little a sentence here and there can make a difference, and that will may end up in court where people are contesting over the contents of that will. So rather than basically while you are perfectly on the right side of law when you are creating a will yourself, you don't have a mandate that you need to hire a lawyer, but getting a lawyer is a good practice because you are talking about millions of rupees worth of assets, and a legal advice can just make sure that your will is a perfect document, so your family does not have to get hassled when it comes to implementation of that will.
Mr. Nath, two follow-up questions over there. Right at the beginning, you mentioned that many people believe that they're too young or they don't have too many assets at this point to create a will. So in that case, why do you stress on that also creating a will? And I'm sure that you would recommend updation of the will as in when, they grow older and they add on to their assets. And the second question is that if I just am using a plain piece of paper and I spend one Sunday afternoon drafting down my will, writing down who gets what,
Yeah.
and that's it, and I just leave the paper as it, would that be a valid piece of paper? Should this entire asset distribution bit be taken to a court of law?
Yeah, so let me just answer the second question first. So let's say you put it on a piece of paper, whatever were your wishes. You just need to get two neighbors who are not the beneficiaries in the will as your witness. So that's the only legal requirement. So you sign your will in presence of two independent people who you know, and who can basically verify that you have signed in their presence, and there is no pressure there is from anybody when you were putting that signature on that piece of paper, and it becomes a valid will. The only thing is that many times people will have they will say that, okay, I am giving my house to my three daughters. Now, one daughter may want to buy the house or sell the house, one daughter may want to rent the house, and a third daughter may want to stay in that. And all three will end up fighting. So I'm just giving a very simple example of how a simple sentence that I am leaving my house to my three daughters can create confusion later on. So that's the reason why expert help. Coming to your question around younger people postponing the idea, let me just give you an example, and this can happen to anyone. Obviously it's a very low probability event, but let's say a husband and wife are traveling in a car and that meets up with an accident, and they leave behind minor children. The first issue that will basically that the children will face is who's going to be their guardian. Is it going to be father's parents or mother's parents or father's brother or mother's brother? And all those guys may end up fighting over the custody of children. So even for younger people, just basically ensuring that they are appointing a guardian, and so that they are loved, their children are protected, and let's say that there is no dispute on the guardianship, and this couple has left behind a lot of assets, and this guardian does not have any understanding of finance. He's not watching your show on a daily basis, and therefore he may just mess around with that entire wealth which was actually meant for the children. So by doing a will, you are not only ensuring that your children basically get a good upbringing through a guardian of your choice, but you can also leave behind details in terms of how your assets need to be managed and how your children, when those assets should get transferred to your children. So whether it's young or old or people with lesser money, in fact, a lot of people say that I don't have enough money. And I tell always to those people that because you don't have enough assets, you need to make sure that all these assets that you are leaving behind get transferred. If a super rich person doesn't leave a will behind, and some of the assets basically get leaked away and the family doesn't acquire those assets, it's still okay. But if somebody who doesn't have enough assets, then it becomes his moral obligation to basically make sure that all assets are seamlessly transferred. So in essence, will can be made by any person, and any and everyone should basically be thinking about creating a will for themselves.
Okay, all right, great. Well, we've received quite a few viewer questions and queries, so let's get straight to that. First up, we have a question coming in from Mr. Rajesh Mutiramani. He emails us saying that me and my elder brother are central government and public sector unit employees, and we are income tax assessees falling under the 30% slab. Now, their parents have passed away. The father passed away in 2002, the mother passed away in 2017. Now, they would like a clarification with respect to perplexities as to whether they can recreate their late father's HUF or a Hindu undivided family by reunion with his older brother as the Karta from the immovable and the movable properties that they have inherited from their parents. And also, he would like to know if they can alternately transfer the assets in favor of an estate in the name of the deceased father or mother and can get a PAN issued in the name of the aforesaid estate. So the parents have already passed. It looks unlikely that they have created a will, but purely on account of ancestral property, they have obviously received the assets that belong to their parents. So how would you advise Rajesh Mutiramani and his older brother?
So first of all, I think if their father left behind an HUF, then the because HUFs are Hindu, so it's Hindu undivided family. So basically, the HUF just continues to the next generation, though they don't need to create one. So if their father had an HUF in which they were co-partners, basically both the sons and both the brothers, then they don't need to recreate. I think their father has not left behind an HUF. In that scenario, they cannot create a HUF in the name of their father. Okay, and so basically HUF is from lineal descendants. So each of these brothers can create their own HUF, but they cannot basically create an HUF which is of both of them together. Okay, now because their father did not create, so that's not possible. They can always create so they are talking about an estate. I think what they mean is because they have mentioned that they want to create it in the name of their father and mother, I would mean that they are referring to a charitable trust, which is always possible. So both of them have got some certain assets and their mother would have got one portion of the assets. So if these two brothers want to shift their assets into a charitable trust, that is also possible. Probably they can do a third thing where they can basically also look at creating a private family trust where both the brothers and their mother can be beneficiaries and all the assets which have been left behind by their father, movable as well as immovable, can move into this trust. So both charitable trust and private family trust is possible, but recreating an HUF if their father did not create one is not possible.
Okay, all right. So Mr. Mutiramani, I hope you've heard out his recommendation and his suggestion on how you can go about things. Okay, let's take on board our next query. It's coming from Santu Mundal, not necessary to related to will, but it's quite a valid question. He asks, how should a 32-year-old earning, married, with a kid keep personal finance very short and simple regarding goals like kids' higher education and retirement? I don't think he has any current investments, but he is very interested in starting off. Luckily, his child is young. He himself is also young. So he still has at least, I guess, I would say 10 to 12 years on his side. So yes, Mr. Nath, I'm sure this is a question that many of your young clients as well may be asking you. How would you recommend Santu go about?
First of all, I think Santu, let me congratulate you because there are very few people in your age bracket who are thinking long term about retirement and children's education. Okay, so it's a fantastic thought to have, and because age is in your side, you will be able to meet both those goals, your child's education as well as your retirement, very comfortably if you're starting now. So to keep things simple, what I would recommend to you is First of all, because you are young and you have goals and you have a family, and because you are young, you can also get an insurance cover at a very low cost. Maybe buy a term cover of 1 crore or 2 crore, because at your age, maybe you will get it for 8,000-9,000 rupees per crore. So that's one step that you need to do. So your life's risk is not, your family's financial future will not get impacted because of your life's risk. The second thing that you can do is basically keep around 6-7 months of your monthly expenses in a bank fixed deposit, which is near your where you live, so in a neighborhood bank branch. Keep that 6-7 months bank deposit, so that it can be utilized in terms of in times of emergency. And then maybe out of your total savings that you are generating on a monthly basis, look at creating an SIP to the extent of 70-80% of those savings, because you are young and you can keep this money aside. It's better that you do some SIPs in some popular mutual funds, and you can take a mix of 1 or 2 large cap funds and 1 or 2 mid cap funds. And for instance, HDFC has this HDFC Top 100, or Axis Mutual Fund has this Axis Blue Chip. You have DSP mid cap or Kotak mid cap. So the Kotak emerging equity. So these are, and there are so many more. So you can pick up 2 large cap and 2 mid cap and start doing a monthly SIP regularly. Just make sure that as your salary increases, you should basically keep increasing the SIP amount. So if your salary goes up by 20%, your SIP amount should go up by minimum 20%. If you have done these 2 things and just continue with those SIPs in times of volatility or not volatility. So COVID times like these, where markets are volatile, will keep returning every 5, 7, 10 years. Okay, but you need to be patient that equity market in the long term will actually end up multiplying the total wealth that you have. So if you keep your SIP investments running for next 10 to 15 years, you will be able to comfortably meet up with your child's education goal, as well as you will have sufficient money for your retirement.
All right, Santhu, I hope you've taken note of how you can, the recommendations coming in from Mr. Nath on how you can essentially start off your investment process. And SIP is great, and always remember to step up your SIP as and when your income as well increases. All right, we have just received an email query from Nayan Gandhi on this entire will creation process. A couple of questions actually. Firstly, he wants to know what's the difference between a will and a nominee. A valid question, I guess, because every time you make, let's say, a fixed deposit, you have to note down who will be your nominee, who's going to be the person who will get it in case of your unfortunate demise. Also, in how long would the transfer of a property, the property that's in the will, take? The transfer, of course, to the heir mentioned in the will. And then he wants to know, should the will be registered? Is it necessary the will is written on a stamp paper? And also, should each and every asset be thoroughly mentioned in the will, or if it is mentioned as building or flat means it's all right? Okay, so basically he wants to know, if you're living in XYZ building on ABC street and on 123 city, do you need to mention each and every aspect, or is it just fine to write XYZ building and ABC street? Quite a few questions, but I guess maybe all valid. So I know you already reiterated some of these points, like for example, does the will have to be on a stamp paper, does it have to be registered? But still, for the benefit of Nayan and maybe any other of our viewers who are just tuning in, if you could help Nayan out with his question.
And for the question, and I think you have asked some very valid questions. First of all, a lot of people talk about, what is the need of creating a will? Because I have mentioned nominee in all my assets, and I want to give all my wealth to my wife, and therefore my wife is second holder in all my assets. So whether it's a fixed deposit or a mutual fund or a demat account or my house, in all my assets, my wife is a joint holder. And I have put my son as a nominee or a daughter as a nominee in all my assets as well. So, what's the question of why should I create a will? Now, legally speaking, nominee is only a custodian, and same is the legal position for a second holder. So let me just explain this a little bit further. Let's say you have a fixed deposit where you have put you and your wife as a second holder. On your demise, your wife becomes the first holder, but she doesn't become the owner of the assets legally. She's the first holder, but she's still a custodian of the asset. So if let's say your son or daughter after 5 years or after 10 years comes, and demands her or his share, your wife will have to give that share to your son and daughter. Similar, for instance, the Hindu Succession Act says that, if on a person's demise, his wealth will get equally distributed between wife, children, and mother. So if mother wants her share, she can always come and claim from the wife. So if you have made your wife second holder in all your assets, that doesn't preclude the rights of your children or the rights of your mother. Same is the case with nominee. So basically, the only place where joint holding, makes a difference is in immovable property. So let's say if you have a flat and you and your wife are joint owners, then both of you are considered to be 50% owner. So in that scenario, you can only gift away 50% of your, or will away 50%. But for that 50%, your wife becomes an automatic owner. She will have to give that 50% right will get distributed amongst all the legal heirs that you have at that point in time. So nominee and second holder does not basically mean that you should not create a will. Okay. The second thing that you asked is basically how, whether the will needs to be registered or it should be, created on a stamp paper. First of all, stamp papers are not required. As we discussed in the beginning of the show, if you just put on a plain piece of paper, whatever are your wishes, that's more than sufficient. Registration is generally not essential, but is recommended. Because what happens that, let's say I create a will today, I'm not going to die tomorrow. I may live for another 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And I don't know how my legal heirs will change. Who's going to be my legal heir? Okay. And so if I have not, if I just leave the will behind, somebody can come and say that this will is forged, or this will was created under duress or force, or this when I created the will, I was not in a sound state of body and mind. So when you are doing the registration, all these things get taken care of, because sub-registrar becomes a de facto witness. Besides the two witnesses that you are basically putting their signature on the will, even sub-registrar is a de facto witness. So the validity of the will increases manifold and the strength, so it cannot be challenged in the court. So you can save the hassles for your beneficiaries by registering a will. So if you have a, let's say, simple family structure and you don't foresee any problems, you can still not have registration. But if you feel that there are complexities which can arise in future, registration is a thing of good order. Another question that you asked was on asset details. And this is such an important. So one of the biggest reasons why one should create a will is because it helps them in consolidation of assets. So, and all those people who are listening to this program, do this test today, just go and ask your wife, how many insurance policies do you have? Or how many bank accounts do you have? Or how many demat accounts do you have? Or ask your son, what's the value of the insurance policies or the total wealth that you have? 90% chance is that they are only partially or completely unaware of your financial position. So just imagine that if you have not listed all these assets in your will, for the family, it becomes like a treasure hunt. So once the breadwinner has gone, then you start hunting the cupboards and start hunting the drawers and files to figure out what are the assets which were left behind. You will not believe, I was reading this data that all the insurance companies in India have something like 15,000 crore of unclaimed policies. So policy holder has died, or the policy is mature and nobody has come
Mr. Nath,
forward.
we have certain time pressure, so I'll have to just cut you right there. But I think largely,
Yeah.
I think largely you've answered most of Nan's questions. But yes, thank you so much for patiently answering all these questions and queries that we've received. We've been getting a lot more, but we're not going to be able to take them. Well, we will take a very short break right here on the show, but when we return, we will be bringing on board PolicyBazaar.com to be talking about Corona Rakshak, Corona Kavach, as well as, of course, whether you should have OPD included in your insurance policies.